All right, let's talk about low point. So first off, a quick review of what low point is. So low point, technically speaking, is the lowest part of our swing. So for example, if we swung and we took a divot, the bottom part of that divot, the lowest part of that divot would be our low point. Sometimes we take a divot, sometimes we brush the ground, and however deep we got in the ground there, that's the lowest point of our swing. Or sometimes when we're hitting driver or we tee up an iron or a wood, we catch the ball on the upswing and we don't actually hit down on it. Wherever that club bottoms out at its lowest point before we start hitting up on it is technically the low point. Now, when we talk about low point, we're really not necessarily talking about technically what is the lowest point of the swing. By definition, it is. If we look on a flight, like Flight Scope, TrackMan, Foresight, whatever it is, and it tells us low point, it's going to tell us where it is at the bottom of the swing. However, when we're actually talking about low point in the terms of for a practical sake, or when we're talking about in terms of hitting the golf ball, we're really using it as a proximity for when are we hitting the golf ball and when are we hitting the ground. That's really when we're using the term low point, what we're trying to get at. Again, when we bottom out, when that club gets to its lowest point, whether we're hitting down on, taking a divot, or we're hitting up on it, that affects how we're going to hit the golf ball and where we're hitting the ground in relationship to the ball. But what we're really concerned about is when is the club making contact with the golf ball and then the ground. In a perfect world, when we're hitting the ball off of the ground, let's say we're in the fairway. Let's just look at a normal lie first before we make any adjustments. If we're in the fairway, in a perfect world, what we're trying to do, if we take a golf ball, which I have here, if our ball is sitting in the fairway, we're trying to make this club get completely underneath this golf ball. Why are we trying to make it get completely underneath? Because if we do, we're hitting it with the loft of the club face over here. When we hit it with the loft, the ball can launch up in the air and it can have spin and it can travel as far as that club is supposed to make it travel. If we don't get completely underneath the golf ball like this, if we start hitting it thin, or we start blading it, or we start hitting the top of the golf ball, what's going to happen? That ball is going to come off low. It might roll on the ground. If we blade it, it might travel way too far. Or if we thin it, it's going to come off low with a lot of spin, and it's not going to travel far enough. So if we're hitting it on the thin or the bladed or the top side of the golf ball, we're going to hit some bad shots. Now, thin, we can get away with. If we only get a little underneath this golf ball, we don't get all the way, but we still get most of the way underneath it, thin is a fantastic miss to have. But if we start living on the side of blading the golf ball or hitting it high in the face, that's devastating. So at least getting enough under it to where if we miss it thin is the first goal. But in a perfect world, like I said, if we hit it absolutely perfect, we're trying to get this club completely underneath the golf ball. Now, here's the crux of it. We're trying to get this club completely underneath the golf ball without hitting the ground before the golf ball. So if the golf ball is sitting right here on my hand, we're trying to get the club completely underneath that golf ball without hitting the ground beforehand behind it, because if we do, we're either going to chunk the golf ball, we're going to hit a drop kick where the club hits the ground and starts twisting closed, or if the ground is very high and soft and it's not going to catch the club very much, we're going to hit the ball high in the face. There's going to be grass caught between the golf ball and the club face, and the ball is going to fly high and it's going to fly very far. It's what we would call a flyer or a jumper. And when, again, we're not going to be able to control our distance. So the goal is to get as much underneath the golf ball as we possibly can without interacting with the ground beforehand, or if we have to interact with the ground beforehand, making it as minimal as possible. Now, there's sometimes we'll break that rule. Maybe we're trying to create a flyer and we're trying to let the ball fly as long as we possibly can, or maybe our ball is sitting in a divot and we're trying to intentionally hit it a little bit thin, so you can play with it a little bit. But if we're just talking about normal scenario, everybody wants to try and do their best to get completely underneath the golf ball and not hit any ground before it. Why? Because it's very predictable when we do that. If we start introducing ground or we start hitting it thin, the ball is going to travel a different height and a different distance, all the things we just talked about. So everybody would benefit on a normal lie to get completely underneath the golf ball without hitting the ground first. So that's low point, and that's what we're trying to do with it. Now, like I said, the crux of that is being able to control when that happens. Let's look at it a couple different ways. First off, the getting underneath it part. Getting underneath it primarily happens from hitting down on the golf ball. There's an old cliche. We hit down on the golf ball to make it go up in the air. Technically, hitting more down on the golf ball is going to make the ball launch lower. But the idea of it is correct. We're hitting more down on it, not because we're trying to launch the ball higher. We're hitting down on it because that lets the club wedge completely underneath the golf ball. And the more I'm hitting down, the club's coming in from a vertical angle away from earth, versus if I'm hitting up, it's coming from near earth and moving up. When we're hitting down on it, we have a chance of descending into it and wedging between the golf ball and the ground. So first off, hitting down on the golf ball is going to increase our odds of sending the ball up in the air. If we get too shallow or catch it too much on the upswing, so I'll put a ball down here. If we get too shallow and catch it too much on the upswing, meaning our club bottoms out over here and we're starting to catch it on the upswing, well, what's going to happen? Either I'm going to bottom out and hit the ground back here, or I'm going to avoid the ground, and by the time I get to the ball, I'm hitting it on the upswing, and now I'm either going to whiff it, or I'm going to top it, or I'm going to blade it, and I didn't have the opportunity to get underneath it. So at the very least, when we're hitting the ball on the ground, we're trying to hit level with the ground. We're trying to have an angle of attack that's zeroed out at the very minimum, or we're trying to hit down on it. We're not trying to catch it on the upswing because we're going to hit it thin, or we're going to blade it, or we're going to top it. The only time we're trying to catch the ball in the upswing is when the ball's teed up high in the rough, or if our ball's actually on a tee itself and we can actually afford to hit up on it and still have enough room to get underneath the golf ball. Otherwise, as a bare minimum, we're trying to hit very level with the ground, or we're trying to hit down on the ground so the club can get completely underneath it without hitting the ground first, and that's going to allow the ball to get up in the air. Now, if we take that too extreme, if we just start chopping straight down like this, the ball won't get up in the air either because we're making the flight come way too low. So for most people when they're starting to learn, it's try and hit as much down as they can, because most people in the beginning have a tough time interacting with the ground. But at a certain point, it becomes a range. It's hitting down enough to where we can hit the ground and we can take a divot, but we're not taking a big old fat trench out of the ground and taking a divot that's that deep. We're trying to make it somewhat reasonable after we learn that skill. But the number one thing with low point is learning to get that club completely underneath the golf ball without hitting the ground beforehand. Now, from there, so the first principle is learning to hit down on it a sufficient amount so we can get underneath the golf ball. The second principle is learning where are we hitting down on it, meaning are we hitting down on it back here? Are we hitting it down on it here? Or are we hitting it down on it over here? Obviously, we know we want to hit down on it on the golf ball, but in the world of practicality, we have to feel that and be able to control that when we're actually swinging a golf club. So what we first want to do is we want to pay attention to that. If we don't pay attention to it and we don't have our mind be focusing on it, well, we're not going to be able to make very good adjustments as we go. Maybe we will just because our athletic body is going to adjust over time, but why take something that could take you a couple months to learn and drag it out for several years because you're just banking on your subconscious response? Why don't we make it more conscious and pay attention to it? And by paying attention to it, we can try and ping pong back and forth until we control our low point. So I like to call it playing the game of Goldilocks. When you're first starting to learn your low point, the first thing you should be focusing on is learn to interact with the ground every time, aka learn to hit down on it every single time like we just talked about it, because the hitting down lets that club get completely underneath the golf ball so it can get sent up in the air. Once you learn to interact with the ground every single time, even if we're hitting fat shots or we're hitting too far in front of it and still hitting it thin, as long as we're interacting with the ground every time, we have a step in the correct direction. From there, it's controlling where we're hitting the ground, behind it, on it, or in front of the golf ball. In a perfect world, we're going to hit the golf ball, and then immediately after the golf ball, we're going to hit the ground, which is going to be in the middle of the ball or just in front of it over here. So we hit the golf ball, and then we hit the ground right after. That's what we're really aiming for when we're hitting shots. So to do that, we want to play a game of Goldilocks. We can say, okay, if the porridge is just right, that's going to be when we hit the golf ball first and then we hit the ground. That's when the shot feels like there's no effort. It feels like the ball just came off the club face and it didn't feel like there's anything that happened in your hands. It feels like nothing. We all know what that feeling is when we hit a flush shot. If we hit a thin shot, the shot's going to sound more ticky and more clanky when we hit it. We're going to feel it sting a little bit more in our hands, and we know when we hit it thin. If we chunk it, it's going to sound more muffled. It's going to sound like we're hitting the ground first, and then we're going to hear the tick of the golf ball after we hit the ground, and we can probably feel that in our hands as well. So we're trying to use all three senses. We're trying to see, did I hit the ground before the ball at the right time, or did I hit it way too far in front of the golf ball? That's number one. Number two, what did I feel? Did I feel like I hit the ground before the ball? Did I feel like it was flush, which is going to be the easy one to identify because it's going to feel like a good shot? Or did I feel like I hit it thin or I didn't hit the ground at all? Third, we're listening to the shot. We're hearing, did it sound muffled because I hit the ground before the ball? Did it sound flush and compressed, or Did it sound ticky because I was too far in front of it? By paying attention to those, first off, you're telling your body, okay, I'm living on the right side of the street, left side of the street, or if I'm walking up the middle, again, the game of Goldilocks. And then you also get to change your intent. Okay, on the last shot or the last two shots, what did I do? I hit behind the ball over here. So what am I going to try and do? I'm going to try and get my club to hit the ground more forward. I'm going to either feel like I'm turning more open, I'm getting my hands more forward, I'm trying to drive my hands more through the shot, I'm trying to lean the shaft more forward. Whatever your tool is for you, because I'm not going to tell you how to swing here. All I'm going to tell you is when you're trying to adjust your low point, play the game of Goldilocks. I hit some shots back here. Let me adjust by trying to hit more forward. Let me take some practice swings and see that club hit in front of the golf ball in this direction. Then once I have a feeling for that, let me make a swing and try and hit a shot with the same sensation and see if it changes. See if I go too far. See if I hit it flush. Maybe I felt that, but I still hit behind the golf ball, so I better make it more extreme. Play the game of Goldilocks and keep adjusting as you need. Maybe you're too hot, maybe you're too cold, maybe you're just right, maybe it's inconsistent, and you just got to keep ping-ponging back and forth until it works its way back into the middle, and over time, you get good at learning that low point. So that's how you start to develop it. If you don't draw attention to it, again, over time, you can just trust that your athletic and subconscious mind and body is going to start to respond to that and figure it out on its own. That's how most people do it. But unless you're a 5, 6, 7-year-old kid and you're waiting until you're 10 years old to start hitting the ball solid, I don't think that's the best way to do it. I'd rather pay attention to it early and often, try and adjust as needed, and your body can start to get better at that. So playing the game of Goldilocks, I think, is very important. And the last thing I would say you should be doing when you're trying to learn low point in the beginning, besides playing Goldilocks, because that's always going to be a thing in the beginning, is take practice swings. It's funny, my dad didn't know anything about golf when I was growing up. He didn't really even play himself, but one thing he always would do, and I didn't even ask about it, or he didn't tell me about it, I just remember seeing him do it, he would find a broken tee on the ground, on the tee box, or he'd find a leaf or a twig or a divot that was laying in the fairway. He would find it, and then he would take a practice swing and try and pick that tee off the ground, or he would try and take that leaf and then try and hit the leaf first and then take a divot. And he was basically, in his practice swings, rehearsing how he was trying to interact with that object and then the ground. It was actually very smart. And I think a lot of people could benefit from that when they play golf or if they go to the range and take practice swings, but especially when playing golf. Find some object out there that's not a golf ball, that's laying near your ball, and try and take a practice swing. Try and make sure you're hitting that object first and then the ground immediately after, and try and make sure you're interacting with the ground every time. Take 2 or 3 practice swings if you need to till you get it right, and start to get a feel. You're building your coordination, you're getting a feel for it. You know if you're going to be too hot or too cold during the day, you can start to adjust as needed to make better contact. So that's the way I would start learning low point. Ultimately, low point is going to be a byproduct of our swing technique and what we do, and it's going to result in how our contact goes. But if we don't at least start paying attention to it and trying to adjust to it and get a good feeling of when things should be happening and controlling how that club's moving through impact, even if we're only hitting chip shots or half shots, it's really hard to build those skills without understanding what it is first. So to me, that's what low point is. It's first off the ability to control our relationship of when we're hitting the golf ball and then we're hitting the ground, but also it's paying attention to it, using our senses, seeing it, feeling it, hearing it, and then trying to scale back and forth until we get better at controlling it.